Oh, let me just well, hello. We have Alena Luciani and Leanna, welcome to the Sport Leadership Accelerator. And I've really been looking forward to our conversation. We go back way back with your family, watching your brother's games when you were in high school, I but you outcompeted your brothers by being a two sport athlete when you came to Laurier. And then, following your academic career, and then you being the first woman uh, strength and conditioning coach for the Laurier football team.
Yeah.
And that you moved on to your to Ohio University with your master's program, and then coming back, you yourself as an entrepreneur has created a great strength and conditioning program. So today we're looking forward to the conversation to talk about your experiences, your career journey, and I think that your those experiences and wisdom will be really valuable to the next generation of sport and recreation leaders, and maybe an opportunity for them to pursue. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I mean, I'm very, very excited for this conversation. And it's great because you've seen me through a lot of different phases of my career and of my life. So I think this is a special conversation for a lot of different reasons.
Oh, well, I'm looking forward to it. So maybe let's start just by talking about your career journey, and what sparked you to go into sport first, and then leading to a really fabulous business in sport and strength and conditioning.
Yeah, so I think, the most important thing I always like to start off with is I have always been an athlete. I think my parents put my brothers and I in sport pretty young. And I always like to mention that because I think so much of what I learned in sport is woven into what I do today. So, I fell in love with basketball. I played a lot of different sports, but I knew pretty early on that basketball was what I wanted to excel in. And you know both my brothers, and I'm fortunate to kind of come behind them and have learned so much from them in my athletic career. So they would come home during the off season and they would say, Elena, come to the gym with us and follow us around the gym and do what we do because it's going to help you be a better athlete. And so pretty early on, I had these qualities and these traits kind of instilled in me with the work ethic and putting in work off the court to be a better athlete on the court. And I've always been interested in science. Aside from gym, science was always my favorite subject. So it was kind of a cool combination of learning how the human body worked and how it applied to, my life as an athlete and my career as an athlete. So it wasn't until I took my exercise science course in grade 12 that I was like, oh, you could kind of put these things together and I could still be involved in sport and I can look at it from a different lens or a different perspective. So that is what kind of got me to pursue my degree in kinesiology at Laurier. And I was fortunate enough to, yes, as you mentioned, play two sports. So 4 years of basketball and a year of lacrosse. And in that time, actually, we started working together. So I started as a personal trainer at the athletic complex. And I had a pretty high profile client at that time with you and Dr. Wen, which is pretty special. Yeah. And in that time, I actually also got a job at a training facility. And that is when I first got into working with high performance athletes. And I remember the moment very specifically, actually. It was after like a 14-hour day at the gym, and I was sitting around with some of the other coaches. And I just thought to myself, I said out loud, I said, I am so tired, but I'm so excited to get up and do this all over again tomorrow. And that is really when the switch flipped for me that I was like, I love this. Not only do I get to stay involved in sport, but I get to utilize what I'm learning in my kin classes and be able to apply it in a different environment or from a different perspective. And I get to help athletes excel in their sport. And, I know what that did for me as an athlete. So it was cool to kind of be on the other side of things and helping others do that. So going back to school, because that was one of my summer jobs, I just started changing all my classes to be reflective of strength and conditioning. And, once you get into your third and fourth year, you're able to kind of maneuver your classes to be more the things that you want to pursue. And in that time, I just started being a sponge. I just wanted to soak up every experience. I started looking at my own coaches a little bit differently. Like I just started almost like observing things a little bit more. And then, that is what kind of, moved me into the direction of, okay, I want to be a strength and conditioning coach and this is what I want to pursue. And thanks to you, I had a very, very unique opportunity of, building the foundation of what is now a full-fledged strength and conditioning program at Laurier. And so I don't know if I ever really got to formally thank you for that and taking a chance on me. So thank you, because not only did that opportunity mean a lot to me, but I think the trust you instilled in me. And, I say the same thing about Michael Falls, who trusted me with 100 men on his roster to be the strength and conditioning coach for his program. And, I think we've moved forward in a lot of ways with young women in strength and conditioning, but we still have a long way to go. And it takes people instilling trust and providing opportunities to allow, things to shift and things to change. So I really do. I've always been very, very grateful for the opportunity you gave me, allowing me to, get hired out of university and find a job, which is special in itself. But being able to, build a program with what we had, and it was a little bit messy and it was gritty, and I had to be resourceful, but I learned so much in my time there. And I'm so grateful to have had that experience for then when I went to work at Ohio University and do my master's. But the confidence I had to work with the football team, and the confidence I had to, I worked with the women's track and field team and I was able to program for them, and I worked with women's basketball, and you know to have the confidence to do that, I think stems a lot from my time at Laurier. So I was at Ohio for a year, with your daughter Haley, which was so fun. And then, I came home and I remember still trying to apply to a lot of different jobs in the NCAA and in the OUA, and one opened up at York University. And I know, that summer was very pivotal for me in a lot of ways, but that was the summer that my dad very suddenly passed. I always mention that because I think it's such a big part of my journey. I think when a big life event happens, it obviously makes you reflect on what you're doing. And I remember going into that year at York University, I was very, very fortunate that I had a full-time role there, but because of the way the schedule was set up, there was actually a lot of time in the schedule where I was sitting alone in the weight room. And I remember one day, obviously, being in a very reflective part of my life. And I remember saying out loud, as by myself in the gym, I was like, I am capable of more than this. And I knew I always had that entrepreneurial side to me because of my mom. And I guess for some context for those that are listening, I did actually register Training to Excel as a business when I was at Laurier. And it was because I had graduating athletes saying, Alena, I don't know what to do in the gym when I graduate. What do I do? Can I pay you for a program? So that's how it started. It was, I programmed for some people. I created some ebooks. I did some training here and there, but I was kind of full time in the collegiate setting. And also just, creating a platform for me to share my experience as a young female strength and conditioning coach. And so I remember being at York and having this thought of, okay, I think it's time to give myself a chance. I think it's time to bet on myself. And so I told myself I'd give it a year and I'd see what would happen after a year to go full time into Training to Excel. And I'm happy to say that that was April of 2018 and it's February 2024 and I'm still at it. So here I
Yeah.
am. I know that was a bit of a lengthy explanation, but
No, what's really interesting, maybe you talk a little bit more about the influence of your two parents, because your dad was a great high school coach, well respected in Halton region,
Mhm.
as well as your mom, who was an educator too, but a motivational speaker, the motivator,
A
with a great
motivator.
sense of humor, and humor has to be infused in what you
Yeah.
do. maybe
Yeah.
talk about that influence that your parents had, because obviously your two brothers are in the education uh,
Hmm.
field also.
Hmm.
But talk about your mom and dad.
I would be happy to talk about my mom and dad because I have so much from both of them. I feel like I've kind of taken both of their strengths and made them into a full-time career. My dad being a coach and an educator, and my mom with the speaking aspect, and even just I think confidence and presence. I learned so much from her. And part of what I do now with Training to Excel, to provide a little bit more context, I have the House of Training to Excel, which is for my athletes in sport and athletes in life. That's where I do my one-on-one small group training, my programming, team training. And then I have the School of Training to Excel, which is where I provide education for other strength conditioning coaches, personal trainers, movement practitioners. So I have online courses and I run clinics. And I feel like in both of those things, I've been able to take the lessons that I've learned from my parents and apply them to both. So the speaking side of things, I was telling my mom I spoke at a conference a couple weeks ago, and she texted me after to see how it went, and I'm like, I'm oddly comfortable up there. Like I feel like very at ease when I'm in front of a group of people, which I know isn't the norm. But I think because I spent so many years going to her presentations and going to see her talks and just seeing the way that she commanded, respect and the attention of everyone with her confidence and the way she spoke and how much passion she had when she spoke. And also witnessing that for my dad as well. Like I was definitely that kid that kind of grew up on the sidelines watching my dad. And so much of how I am as a strength and conditioning coach, I learned from my dad, and something I take so seriously and something I try to do with my continuing education that I provide for others is highlight the importance of building authentic relationships and connections with the people that you work with. I could write the best program in the world, but if I don't take time to connect with someone, they probably won't adhere to that plan, and that's going to be just a piece of paper for them to look at. So there is so much I've learned from my dad, and that's why I always talk about, the year that I lost him, because so much of what I do in Training to Excel is in hopes of carrying on his legacy and everything that I do. And he was someone that, was very, very well educated himself in the education sector, but I think was almost kind of ahead of his time a little bit with how he got his athletes to buy in. And the things I learned from him and the things I learned from my mom is the stuff that you don't learn in textbooks.
Right.
None of my certifications talked about the quote unquote soft skills of how you present and how you coach and how you cue someone. And a lot of that I learned from my dad. Like I would watch him just in the way he interacted with his athletes, and he would know what their parents did. He would know what they did on the weekend. He would know what their favorite color was and how they were doing in school. And I feel like that wasn't the norm. Like I had some coaches that were similar to that, and I had some coaches that couldn't care less. And it was almost hard to like adhere to I always did because that's the type of athlete I was, but it was harder to adhere to the coaches that I'm like, I don't think they really care about us. It's kind of hard to like
Right.
follow suit when someone's like telling you what to do, but you're like, I don't know if you actually care about the outcome or care about how it's impacting your team. And so that's something I always really, really valued in watching my dad. He was tough. Like he by no means like sugar-coated things, and he gave his team a lot of tough love, but they would listen and they would take it because they knew that my dad really, really, really cared about him or cared about them. And I think a great reflection of that is the day of his visitation. There were probably over 1,000 people that came through, and all of them talked about how my dad made them feel. And so the one quote that I always, always think about is athletes don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And
Right.
my dad was a fantastic example of that. And that's definitely the legacy that I want to leave with what I do with Training to Excel.
Well, certainly in strength and conditioning, there's a process, and you mentioned about things at the very beginning being messy in terms of
Mm-hmm.
learning things and struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe elaborate on how struggle and adversity really is the path to success, and how do you overcome it?
Yeah, I love this question because I think, when we look at strength and conditioning, essentially I'm getting people to work through adversity in their training session. It's almost like you're micro dosing adversity for you to overcome and challenge yourself and try a new weight and get and adapt and get stronger. But I also think, when I was younger, I think I used to fear negative experiences because I thought, oh, I can't learn anything from negative experiences. And the older I get and the more I experience, the more I realize, oh, I could learn more from a negative experience than I can almost from a positive experience. There's things that we can learn from both. And I think when I reflect back to the most pivotal moments in my life, a lot of them were actually massive challenges that I worked to overcome. And I think it's even just affirming that it's like, I can do this. I can get through these things. Like, I had a lot of challenges with, and I still have challenges being, a relatively young woman in the field. I think there's a lot of people that overlook me for things, a lot of people, and I'll credit my parents' genes. Like, I think I've been told I look younger than I am. So it's almost like I have all these like steps I have to take to almost like win people over or like earn the respect of people. And that's just part of it. Like, I never say like, oh, woe is me. It's so much more challenging, but it's just the reality. Like, this is society. Women have to work a little bit harder to gain the respect of the athletes, especially when it comes to a sport like football. And I remember having some challenges with some of those athletes, and many of them were awesome. I had a really overall great experience working with the football team, but then I also had some really challenging dynamics and relationships and conversations of people that, like, for whatever reason, they were just never going to trust me. They were just never going to listen to what I had to say. They always wanted to try to one up me and be better than me. And I couldn't earn their respect. And I think part of going through experiences like that, they're very frustrating. But part of me, I always think of what my dad used to say when I would get really heated after a game or something would happen. And he'd say, Alena, who can you control? And I would always kind of roll my eyes and say, I can only control myself. But it was in going through some of those more challenging relationships and dynamics with some of the athletes, I just thought, you know what? All I can do is control myself and the care I'm providing for them. And I want them to know that I care. But for some of them, doesn't matter what I do, they just won't choose to listen. And so, that's at times a hard pill to swallow, but I think all these really challenging experiences has only made me stronger. I know that sounds kind of cliche, but the
No,
older I get, the like, it's true. Like, the more you go through it, you almost get like, I heard someone use the term callous the other day. And it's true, like, the more you're using heavy weights and you get calluses on your hands, the easier it becomes to kind of grip those heavier weights. So that's kind of what I think about it with those challenging experiences. It just helped me build up a little bit of a tougher layer.
yeah. Well, I can relate. I was a bricklayer's helper one time before university. So your hands, it takes a while before they get calluses on.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned, and everybody will go, and a lot of times when people see successful people, they just see the success part. But if you
Mhm.
take a look at everybody who has been successful, they've gone through some kind of uh, like you had said, a major life moment on that. What would you know? I in one book it's called Life Quakes, and everybody will have it. It'll be a death of a family member or an end of a relationship or maybe losing your job at one point
Mhm.
on that side. But in that, and I've gone through uh, multiple life quakes of that nature. There's always a learning that comes out of it. So maybe speak to uh, how some of the different struggles that you have, like even a life quake could be transition.
Mhm.
I remember when I got married, that was a
Yeah.
transition. When I had
Yeah.
children, that was a
Yeah.
transition.
Yeah.
New job. That was a
Mm,
transition. So maybe you talk about transitioning, because you
yeah.
had to transition, and like you say at the very beginning, it's messy.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that pops into my head in reflecting on some of the more challenging times and yeah, especially early on in my career, I think one of the biggest things that I learned is this quote kind of encapsulates it pretty well is you could be the juiciest, ripest peach, and there's still going to be someone that hates peaches. And it's that's kind of like a light way of saying like you could be the best of the best and there's still going to be someone that doesn't like you. And a great example is like Taylor Swift. She pretty much runs the world right now. She does so much good and there's still going to be someone that's like, I hate Taylor Swift. So like I think that was helpful in overcoming some of these challenges I had. And you know I'd like to think have always approached transitions and changes in my life with a good, I say that lightly, a good mindset. I think, after I lost my dad, I started my new role at York 3 days after his funeral, which I just don't recommend to anyone doing. But in my head, I was just so hell bent on being like, I need to start, I need to like kind of earn my stripes. I need to show up. And it really, I think when you're put in these experiences, it really teaches you just how tough you are. Like, I think if I had looked at that or if someone had told me that before that happened to me, I'd be like, what the F are you doing? Like, you need to take time to heal and grieve and all these things. And, I definitely needed that time and it manifested in other ways kind of later on. But I really look back on that being like, damn, I was tougher than I thought I was, even just in transitioning out of my full-time role at Laurier and going to Ohio. At first, I think in my head, I was like, am I going backwards? Like I had this like head position and now I'm going back to school. But I really do think it's how you approach it and the mindset you approach it with. And like I said earlier, I think I used to shy away from negative experiences because I thought, oh, it won't teach me anything or I'm not learning from it. And I think what I learned in kind of those messy transitional years is like you probably learn more from the negative experiences than you do from the positive ones. And there's always something that you can take and utilize in a more positive way moving forward. So it's like, yes, I probably should have given myself more time after my dad's funeral and before I started, but damn, I showed up and I showed up well on that first day of work. And, maybe that wasn't the healthiest thing for me to do, but I can also look back and be like, yeah, I am disciplined and I'm a tough cookie when I need to be. And sometimes you have to kind of prove that to yourself. Like you'd like to think that about yourself, but it's not until you're presented with these experiences and this adversity that you could actually kind of prove to yourself that you are.
Right. Well, let's transition back to sport, strength and conditioning, and strength and conditioning for a lot of people. There's a lot of misconceptions about strength and conditioning, and maybe you want to elaborate that. One of the things when I look at your Instagram, also you have clients that are high performance athletes, but you also have Gladys and your mom, who
Yeah.
are, older adults, but
Mhm.
are inspirational when you
Yeah.
watch them. So, maybe speak to some of the common misconceptions about strength and conditioning.
Yeah, I think when people think of strength and conditioning, they think, that's directly related to the athletic population. And that's very true. I refer to myself as a strength and conditioning coach for a couple different reasons. That's where a lot of my background is working with, high performance athletes. My certifications are in strength and conditioning. And the coach part of my title is very, very important. That's not to say I don't work one on one with people. I still work one on one with people. So some people will say, oh, you're a personal trainer. And there's nothing wrong with being called that. But like I said, the coach part of my title is very important. And I think strength and conditioning can be accessible to everyone. And something that I want to do with Training to Excel is part of why I want to run my own business is so I can kind of rewrite the script of who strength and conditioning is for. So I refer to all of my clients as athletes. I have athletes in sport, which are my high performing athletes that are still competing and working towards, a specific competition or a specific season. And then I have my athletes in life that just want to get better and perform at their best in life. So those are people like Gladys and my mom and all the other individuals I work with that are kind of 70 plus. And I think that's actually been a really cool area for me to move into, because a lot of what I program for them is very similar to what I program for my athletes. Obviously, there's a lot of different variables in there, but we're not reinventing the wheel with a squat. Like, a squat is a squat, and perhaps, my mom utilizes a different variation than maybe some of my high performance athletes. But the goal is always the same. I want people performing at their best, whether that's at work, in life, or in their sport. So I think you're right. There is a misconception of like, oh, I can't do that, I'm not an athlete. And it's like, okay, well, do you want to get better? Do you want to perform at your best in whatever you do? Do you want to be able to move well and, recover from injury quickly and be able to, move well for years and years down the road? Well, I would consider you an athlete. And, I actually think a lot of my now athletes in life are all retired varsity athletes, or many of them are retired varsity athletes. So it's essentially giving people that space and that team environment when they've kind of graduated or have transitioned out of organized sport. And with Training to Excel, I'm trying to provide that environment and that atmosphere for those athletes in life. I think, to me, it's more of a mindset than it is like, oh, I never played a sport, I can't work with Training to Excel. It's like, well, yeah, you can. Because I also think part of strength and conditioning, there's an element of education. There's, an element of longevity and looking at the big picture and how the little things we do contribute to that big picture. And these are all things I apply to my athletes in sport and my athletes in life. So I think strength and conditioning for some can feel intimidating. And I'm trying to just create a team environment where everyone feels welcomed and feels included.
Yeah. Well, what I really admire about your talks online is you incorporate a lot of new trends, and as well as nutrition. You incorporate the
Mhm.
nutritional aspect of things. You mentioned about longevity, and really the body is a miracle machine that is really a pharmacy. And the only way to activate it is through human movement, to
Mhm.
get the neurochemicals, the endorphins, and so forth working. And
Mhm.
you speak to that a lot. How do you keep on top of all those trends and that research, especially with a busy business and and all the things that you do? Because
Yeah.
you also, in my view, when I see you, Alena, you're a much more holistic educator than just the specialized strength and conditioning is like
Yeah.
blinders on and so forth. You incorporate so many things that balances a person's approach to something that's important. Strength and conditioning is
Mhm.
important,
Mhm.
but so is nutrition, and so is
Yeah.
even educating.
Yeah.
Ongoing learning. So
Yeah.
maybe speak to that.
Yeah, I really do try to see things from a holistic viewpoint, because it would be silly of me if I only focused on the training, movement, strength conditioning side of things, because your sleep and recovery is going to impact how you feel in your training session, your nutrition, your stress levels. All of these are going to play a role in how your body responds and adapts to a training stimulus. So I'd be doing the people I work with a disservice if I didn't also talk about those other things. And there's a really great book by a researcher, Dr. Greg Wells, called The Ripple Effect. And he kind of talks about those four pillars of, like, I think it's movement, mindfulness, sleep, and nutrition. And talks about how it's essentially like these puzzle pieces that all need to fit together. And I think something that gets missed sometimes in strength conditioning is like everyone's so hyper focused on like the sports science and the programming, but we forget the human aspect. Like, we're working with humans. And if one of the student athletes I work with just went through a major breakup, they might not feel 100% when they come in for their training session. And I need to have tools to be able to get a read on that so I can incorporate the human aspect into the programming aspect of strength conditioning and being able to modify and adjust. And I think that's a frustration of mine when I, maybe speak to some colleagues or I'm seeking continuing education. Everything is very kind of niche information when I think it's important that, not to say that we specialize in a lot of different things. I'm very mindful of my scope of practice, and I have a nutrition certification, and I only try to share things again within my scope because there are people that are
Right.
nutritionists and dietitians that deal with it on a more specific level. But I think that there's, you know, in having been a strength and conditioning coach in so many different environments, people share a lot with you. Like, you end up being a sounding board for the people that you work with, whether it's student athletes or maybe my mom's venting about something. Like, people share a lot with you. So it's important that you know how to take that information and actually be able to apply it and be able to educate the different individuals in different ways, because every human has different needs. And so I really want people to see that, like, their nutrition and their sleep impacts the way they train. I want people to see it from that kind of big picture lens. And I try to use my platforms as a space for sound education. And I'm also forever a student of the game. I'm always going to be learning. I'm always going to be trying to keep up with research. I am fortunate that one of my newsletters that goes out every other week, my Coaches Club newsletter, it forces me to read an article because I always post an article in the newsletter and I always give a little debrief. So I kind of did that strategically so I can ensure that I'm continuing to, read and kind of keep up to date on things, but also not bury myself too much in the research, because you can find research on either end of the spectrum to support whatever claim you want to make. And I try to hang out in the gray area because I think there's a lot of variables that come into play. So as much as I always try to continue to learn, I'm also mindful of giving myself time to actually put things into practice and actually read the experience, as opposed to being like, well, this article said that this athlete should respond this way. And guess what? This athlete didn't respond this way. So how am I going to react to that? And how am I going to adjust based off of what I'm seeing in real time and not just what I'm reading about? I think
Right.
that's something that's a bit of a disconnect. Like, some coaches read a lot, but then don't have the environment to see it unfold in real time. And I think
Right.
they miss out on kind of aligning the like principles and aligning what they see in real life. So I always try to keep up, and I'm constantly, enrolled in different courses and certifications, because if I'm going to be in a place of educating others, I want to ensure that I'm always growing and evolving as a coach. But also giving myself the opportunity to like take what I've learned and be able to apply it and see how it actually impacts the individuals I work with.
That's great advice in terms of lifelong learning because, like, even now, I'm learning the retirement schedule on that, and sleep, as well as social contact. Social contact's
Mhm.
actually higher than the
Yeah.
exercise, nutrition, sleep. Those are really the pillars on that side. You mentioned, you grew your business first in terms of coaching athletes and other clients, but you also have an aspect of coaching other coaches
Yeah.
because you've come to a level in your career where you can spread that knowledge that would impact coaches that can impact other people on a different level. Talk to me about that type of education that you provide to other personal trainers, other strength and conditioning coaches, and what do you value from it?
Yeah, I think so that's all under the umbrella of the School of Train to Excel. And this was something that my dad always encouraged me. Oh, Alena, I think you should be a teacher. I think you'd make a great teacher. And I mean, God bless any full-time educators that are listening to this, but I just don't have the patience to be in a traditional classroom. That's just not my area. But I remember when I ran my first clinic, in-person clinic, where we talked about, connection and communication and cueing and programming, these foundational principles of coaching. And I remember having a moment, and honestly, I got emotional, in that moment. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is what my dad meant. He didn't necessarily mean a traditional classroom. He just meant that like I should be educating others in some capacity. And so when I found that, I think at first, like it's really easy to be hit with the imposter syndrome and think like, I'm not old enough. I don't have that much experience. And what I remind myself of, and I always come back to this, is I have a unique perspective to share because I think I would keep waiting and keep making excuses if I didn't just say, you know what, I'm just going to do it. And if I can benefit one individual, then I'm doing my job. And so really what the School of Train to Excel is all about is creating practical and applicable continuing education. I think in the field of strength and conditioning, and I've kind of mentioned this already, but everyone loves to get nitty gritty. They love to talk about the sports science and all the measurements and the tech. And yes, there's definitely a place for that. But I think people forget about the human aspect of it. So something I'm really passionate about educating on is not only what I have a master's degree in, and that's, sports science and recreation with a distinction in coaching, where we learned about all these things. We learned about management skills and leadership skills, and we learned, the theory of the value of communication and the value of bringing together a collective people to work towards a common goal. But I also have these natural abilities that I learned from my parents at such a young age. And I feel like when I first got into strength conditioning, I was like, oh, but those aren't important. It's not important that I know how to connect with people and communicate in a way that they get. No, no, I need to be smarter with writing a program, and I need to read more research and all of these things. And I shied away from my natural skill set for a long time until I was put in that educator role. And I thought, no, I have a unique perspective to share. And whenever I do educate in any of my courses and any of my clinics, I always stand up there and say, hey, like I can learn just as much from all of you as you can learn from me. This is like a collaborative learning experience. I'm not here to tell you that this is the only right way of doing things. I'm here to share with you in my 13 years of coaching, my certifications, my degrees, all these different things, and my experience. Like, this is what I've learned. And these are the things that have been around for years and years and years. And these are the things that are going to be around for years and years to come. So the sports science and the tech, like I'm sure there's always going to be a place for that. But like we also have to be able to take what we know and distill it down into digestible content for the individuals that we're speaking to. Because the people that come to see me, a lot of them don't have a kin degree. A lot of them, don't know the human body the way I do. So I can't speak to them as if they know what I know. I need to be able to translate it in a way that they're like, oh, okay. Instead of saying, activate your glutes or engage your glutes, I'm saying pinch a penny between your butt cheeks and hold on to it the whole time. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can do that. And not only is that helpful for them to execute things well, but it's also going to help them retain that information and be able to acquire a new skill and be able to repeat it over time when I'm not present. That's my job as
Right.
a coach. So I'm really, really passionate about the education piece. And from a business standpoint, it's also like this is the way I've been able to scale my business because, I'm not necessarily trading my time for or hours for money. Like I have built very robust online courses. I have, 1-day clinics that I administer to different training facilities and clinics. So, from a business standpoint, it's also helpful to be in this space. But I also just needed to drop my ego and say, like, yeah, I might not be 45 with 20 years experience, but I'm, almost 34 with 13 years. And I think I've learned a couple things along the way. And I want to share that with people. And, instead of getting caught up in, what other people might think, I just decided to take a chance on myself. And I'm so happy I did because I feel my dad's presence more when I'm teaching than I do doing anything else. And that's really, really, really special to me.
Well, certainly knowing your dad, he was one of the things, and I learned this from one of my mentors that when I worked for OFSA, was that sport and recreation or fitness, strength and conditioning can be a powerful platform of which to educate people. And
Hmm.
you have to do it though in a way that was is totally within your control, what you focus
Yeah.
in on. And you mentioned the word authenticity. And that's one of the things, Alena, that I've always seen as you've grown your business, even online, and is that your authenticity really comes on there. And if people don't like that component part,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's okay. It's not their cup of tea. But
Hmm.
if you impact, as you said, one person, that
Hmm.
can mean a great difference. You mentioned about your business. You had to learn a lot of different skills. Right now, I'm working on my business, and social media and technology I always, when I was an athletic director, I had smarter people than me that can do that sort of thing. Now I'm learning that aspect of it, although I do contract out a lot to buy back my time because time is
Yeah,
valuable
it is.
on that side. Speak to me because as an entrepreneur, uh, creating a niche, moving to Toronto, and working in different facilities. You worked in different universities. You're still associated with McMaster.
Yeah.
Do work with them and consulting with other organizations.
Hmm.
Talk to me about how you sort of threw yourself into being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I actually love thinking about this because I think part of why I wanted to be an entrepreneur is because I'm multi-passionate. So it's like, yes, I love coaching and I love being in the gym and I love the creative process of building out content for a course or being able to travel and administer these clinics to different facilities. And I remember, in my time at York when I was reflecting on like what my next step was and what I wanted to do, there was a lot I wanted to create for the athletes. And I remember not necessarily getting the support from the athletics department. And this is not to knock anyone, but just like at the time, maybe they didn't see value in it. And I just thought, like, there's so many things I want to create. Like, I'll do all the work. You just need to give me the thumbs up. And that's why I was like, you know what? Well, maybe if I just work for myself, the only person that could tell me no is me, and I don't have to listen. So I just thought, and now that I've, training to excel is turning 9 this year, and I've been at it full time for, the last 6 or so years, I've learned that there's components of building a business that I actually really enjoy. I kind of like having, and I've set up my schedule to create time to be able to do my admin and to be able to create marketing assets and do all these different things because I actually really enjoy it. I still coach a lot, but I also am at a point where I want to design a schedule that gives me time to fill different buckets that I want to fill. And, I really appreciate what you said about the authenticity piece, because that's something that I really try to bring forward, especially in a space like social media where, you know, everyone can be whoever they want to be, but I want people to connect with me and who I am as a person. And I think that's taken so much less effort. Like I could just show up as I am and I share about what I'm passionate about, and I'm not trying to be someone I'm not. And I think that's why I'm able to be so active on social media. But I actually really enjoy the different aspects of being an entrepreneur. I will say one of my biggest challenges is the sales and marketing of things because some people do a 4-year degree on that. And
Right.
so it is challenging sometimes to have to start from ground zero and really learn a skill set that you know nothing about. Like my background and my education is in my coaching and what I do as a strength conditioning coach. But some of the other parts of being an entrepreneur, I've really just had to trial and error things. But I also am a kinesthetic learner. Like I learn best when I do things myself and mess it up and try it again and mess it up again and then figure it out. And maybe I'm a little weird for saying this, but it's like I actually enjoy that learning process and I feel so much more confident when things work because I know I've tried different things to get to that, successful part. So I
Uh,
actually really enjoy like all the other pieces that it takes
Yeah.
to be a business
You
owner.
mentioned something about how about doing and confidence.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
Dr. Dana Sinclair there, who's just written a book, Dialed In, she talks that confidence is overrated in the fact that a lot of people feel you need confidence before you do something. But when you
Hmm.
think about it, it's the doing that gives you the confidence.
A
And
hundred
so,
percent.
yeah. And that, again, reading her book, I go, geez, that's the best way to kind of describe how you can get confidence. And you kind of
Yeah.
articulated that in that the only way that you learned all the different processes of the sales and marketing component part is in the doing. And
Hmm.
even though again it could be messy at the very beginning,
Yeah.
it
Still is.
slow progress is still progress on that
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the other aspects that I really think that authenticity shows, and I love your Sunday morning walk one because it speaks to, first of all, you have a great relationship with your partner Ryan, but it also speaks to the fact that you need downtime and
Yeah.
active recovery. So
Hmm.
talk about rest and active recovery in your holistic program of strength and conditioning.
Yeah, I think part of actually why I share that is that's something I'm very actively working on. And what I mean by that is I've always been someone that like loves just go, go, go. I'm very disciplined. I'm very regimented. I really like feeling like I'm constantly progressing. And I think what I learned in past experiences is that will often lead to burnout. And burnout is so much more than just feeling tired. And I don't know if I ever really shared this with you, but I definitely noticed nearing the end of my second year working at Laurier, I was very, very burnt out. And what scared me the most was when it started impacting my mental health. I kind of ignored the physical red flags, let's say, like, being overly sore for an extended period of time, having really kind of sporadic sleeps, like just waking up every couple hours, not having a lot of like anxiety. When it started kind of manifesting in different ways and having, darker thoughts and just constantly feeling doubtful and sad and depressed in a lot of ways, I knew I had to make a change. And so that's something that I've tried to be a little bit more vocal about because I know there's a lot of individuals that operate the same way, high achievers, we all very type A, we want to do our best, we want to perform at our best, but it's like we often think that rest is going to move us back when really I really, really feel like it propels us forward. And what's so interesting is I know what rest does from a physical standpoint, from a physiological standpoint, like rest and recovery is where the magic happens. And so it's taken some time to kind of train myself, not only with my own training, but also with taking space from work in my professional life. But I feel like, in doing things like having these Sunday rituals where Ryan and I will go walk around the city, we'll try a new coffee spot, like that is a way that I like to rest and recharge. And I really, really think that's played a huge role in allowing me to have this sustainable effort towards growing my business and being a strength conditioning coach and seeing so many people throughout the week. Like, I think now because I've learned that rest is absolutely crucial for success, I really feel like it's moved me forward versus the days where I was working 24/7. I was working out also 7 days a week. Like it was very unhealthy. And I feel like I've been able to build and grow and scale and all these things because I've been resting more. And I won't lie, like I'm still not great at it. And sometimes, our walk conversations turn into like brainstorming sessions, but I think I have taken a lot of steps forward and I also want to be really open in sharing that because I know there's other people that operate the same way I do. And I think it's really helpful to when you see someone else kind of resting and recharging and doing that for themselves, it almost is like that little bit of permission to be like, oh, I can do that too. And as much as I feel like we shouldn't need permission to rest, I think that's a positive thing that we could take from being in the social media environment.
Yeah, very, very much so. The neuroscience course that I took about a year ago, it talked about it was a course on flow, on how to get into the zone. And there's four phases of flow. And the first is struggle. And a lot of people quit at struggle, but you got to frame struggle as your brain just getting the pattern to what you want to concentrate on, do. Uh, and then you go into the flow, but you need the last phase is actually called active recovery. And it says
Mm,
that within 90 to 120, you work on something, do something, take a break. It could be breathing exercises, it could be walking in nature, but your brain is actively moving it from the frontal cortex back to
mm,
long term memory and processing it while you're there. Similar to sleep. Sleep, your brain is still working and it's actually processing. And if anybody, and
mhm.
I'm sure you've had it, you know, something that's been a problem that you can't solve, all of a sudden you're in the shower and it'll come, or you
Yeah,
wake up in the morning and you go, oh, yeah, I've
yeah,
done something on that side. And that's why, I really appreciate that you talk about the value of rest and recovery
mhm.
and not, you know, just have the blinders on doing the programming on that side. Um, you're now a speaker also on that. And you just came off a conference recently where you talked about the fact that you really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
You know, talk about that aspect of speaking that you've come to.
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned this earlier. I, I'm oddly comfortable on a stage, I guess we could say. And I'm not saying that to be like, oh, I'm not trying to be cocky, but I think again, there were many years that I shied away from this like natural skill set I had as a communicator and as an educator. And I feel like when I finally took ownership of these innate qualities, like the ones I learned at a very young age, watching, both my parents in their different environments, I think that's when things really started to unfold for me, and in understanding like my style and how I go about educating on things. And it's a skill that I'm very proud of, and I don't admit that very often. So I know this is being recorded. So it's, being recorded that I am proud of myself or something. But,
It's good to
similar
be
to what
proud of yourself. You
yeah,
should be.
yeah. But similar to what I chatted about in kind of being able to carry on my dad's legacy, it's like that feels like an environment where I really get to embody all the things that my mom taught me. And, yeah, there's something about it. It's fun to like interact with people. And I think I have a bit of a different presentation style in that I like it to feel more collaborative. Like even I spoke at a conference where, I had an hour or so to, chat with this group of individuals. And I don't know how many other presenters asked questions and got the audience involved, but I tried to do that. And I also, wanted it to feel like a conversation as opposed to me just saying like, here's everything I'm telling you. I want people to feel like they know me and they're kind of part of it, as opposed to like I'm here and they're here. So it's something that I'm, trying to seek out more opportunities to do, because I do feel like I have a unique perspective to share. And I feel like I have things that I would love to continue educating on in bigger spaces with bigger audiences. Like it's scary, but I don't know. It also, if you're talking about things that you're passionate about and that you're knowledgeable about, you feel a little less like an imposter. And I definitely feel imposter syndrome all the time. But I also keep reminding myself of the mantra, like I have a unique perspective to share. I'm not saying I'm the smartest. I'm not saying I know more than this person. I'm just saying I have something I want to share, and no one's walked a day in my shoes. So I have a unique perspective. And yeah, it might not be the most experienced, it might not be, what you've heard before, but I have something and I want to share it. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So yeah, that's something that I definitely would love to do more of.
And you mentioned about asking really powerful questions so that people get to reflect. And on your social media, you ask questions out to the virtual world, which is me
Yeah.
watching. It's true that everybody needs to incorporate that information that you're giving into their own unique world, and
Hmm.
how does that apply to me? And that'll a lot of times you reflect on an experience that I might have had that I
Hmm.
can incorporate your message into what I do. I actually took a course recently again on facilitation, and it's
Cool.
about asking powerful questions online and getting, especially in a virtual use, to get your audience to interact with each other, because part of the learning is not just the expert up there, but there's a lot, like when you're speaking to an audience, there's a lot of knowledge in that room. How do you get
Hmm.
that out? And I
Hmm.
find when you are on social media and you ask those questions, you actually are drawing me to reflect on my own experience and do that. Now, mind you, there were some times when you were personal training myself and Dr. Wen that may not have appreciated the direction you were giving me at that time, but I knew it was good for me. So I
Yeah.
dealt with and I reflected. I still reflect on that experience as something that I learned a lot from you,
Yeah.
about how to keep in healthy shape and longevity and so forth on that
Uh,
side.
I think just going off of one thing you mentioned there, something that I actually share with the coaches and the trainers that I educate, part of what I talk about is with the cueing aspect. So you're coaching a movement, you're instructing an individual to do a squat of some sort. I think one of the most powerful things we can do as coaches is ask the right questions as opposed to telling the individual another coaching cue or another instruction. So instead of saying, okay, I want you to do this, this, and this on your next set, instead it's, how did that feel? How did that rep feel? Did that feel different from the first one? And it's like, if you're asking the right questions, you can actually gather all the information that you need as opposed to trying to guess which coaching cue is going to be right for that individual. So I do think learning how to, as you said, like facilitate conversation and ask the right questions can actually be so much more beneficial than just telling people what to do. Because if I were to ask the right question, just as you said, it forced you to reflect and think about, how you would approach it or what you were thinking about when I was giving you that cue or whatever it might be. And I can get the information I need from you if I'm asking the right questions, as opposed to just telling you what to do. Like, I think that's how we foster that like long-term skill acquisition in the coaching space, is being able to help people connect the dots themselves, as opposed to just handing everything to them on a platter.
Yeah. One of the things too that you probably learned from your mother is humor.
Yeah.
And your mother's known as the motivator, and I'm looking forward to the 2024 Olympics because I I know she'll get
They'll have something.
get back online presence of different events that she has, which is really inspiring for a lot of people to get moving. But talk about that influence of speaking that your mother's had. Part of it's she certainly has some great, serious, and impactful messaging in there, but she's been able to incorporate that with humor.
Mhm. I
Talk to
think
that.
Yeah, I think my mom does such an awesome job of walking into a serious space and not being able to make light of it, but bring light into it. So instead of, let's say my dad's funeral, like the fact that she did what's the word? The eulogy? Is that what it
You
is?
yes.
Yeah, like the fact that she was able to do that and she made people laugh and cry at the same time, like that really, really describes my mom so well, is she can walk into a space and not making fun of it. Like, sometimes comedians will kind of like pick on people. My mom does such a great job of like getting everyone in on the joke, if that makes sense, or bringing light to serious conversations. And I really do think her presence is something that I've learned so much from. And it's funny because now that I'm like actually like researching things and becoming more mindful of, how I show up and how I speak and all of this, like all of the things that she taught me is now supported by research. It's like people have actively gone out and have tested and gathered data to show that making eye contact with people, or facilitating conversation, or asking the right questions, like this creates this presence. And she just has, I honestly can't even put my finger on it, but she just has this energy that is electric, and people want to know her. People want to talk to her. People want to be connected to her because she just makes them feel good, whether it's making them laugh or making them feel seen and included and part of the conversation. And that's something that both my dad and her do incredibly well. And I feel like that's something that's really important to me when I think of building my community and building my team. I want people to feel like they have a place on my team. I want them to feel included in the conversation. I want them to laugh, and I want them to connect with people and leave feeling better than they did when they walked in. And that, I've seen my mom do it on a one-to-one scale, and I've seen my mom do it in front of 1,000 people. And it's one of the most beautiful things. And I am so grateful to be in a position where I can take these learnings from both my parents and be able to apply it to what I do. So I mean, I just think the world of both my parents. And since my dad being gone, I have the most respect for my mom in taking on both roles and still being able to do it with such grace and humor and just really, really have fun in life. And that is something that I think the world could use more of.
Yes, and I still feel your dad and your mom, when
Yeah.
the meetings, even the time your mom would give me the Baileys to bring in for the coffee watching
Yeah.
games on that. I could say that now,
Yeah, you
that's not
can.
gonna. But this has been a great conversation. Before we end up, um, maybe uh, explain to me what your what you feel is success.
Oh, I should have prepared for this one.
Ah,
You know what? I think success for me is making a positive impact on other people that have a ripple effect in their lives. Because if I can have a positive impact on one person and they feel better when they leave the gym, or they leave a call, or they leave a conversation with me, hopefully that will have then a positive impact on their partner or their friends or the people at work that they see. And I just think, like, just as we've seen, a negative ripple effect, I think we can also have that in a really positive way. It's like the pay it forward thing. Someone in front of you in line pays for your coffee, you do the same thing for the person behind you, and it just has that domino effect of really positive energy. And I think success to me is being able to have a positive impact on people's lives. And of course, as a business owner, like, money and all that is important, but at the end of the day, I want people to keep coming back to the gym or keep coming back to training to excel because they just feel better, whether that's physically, mentally, emotionally, whatever it might be. Like, that to me is most important. And I think I'm someone that will always be chasing success. I think success will always look a little bit different. But if I really were to like reflect on things, success to me is making a positive impact that will create a ripple effect in the world.
what a great definition. Be like Joe.
Yeah. Live like Joe.
Live like Joe. And I want to thank you there. How can people get in touch with you? You've got a great Instagram channel as well as a website.
Yeah, so training, the number two and the letters XL. So training to excel, that's what I am on Instagram. That's my website. So trainingtoexcel.com. My email is Alena at trainingtoexcel.com. And I always have a quote unquote open door policy. So if anyone after listening to this has a question or wants to chat more about something, please feel free to message me on any of those platforms because I'm always happy to connect and continue the conversation.
Well, if anybody wants an authentic leader, somebody who's going to make a difference in your life, you got to contact Alena on that. And Alena, I want to thank you very much for this conversation. I've learned a lot on there, and and thanks for coming on to the Sport Leadership Accelerator.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's really cool to see this all come full circle.
Thank you.